What is an unconditional life? A perfect life? No. A life without pain? Not even close. An unconditional life is when you choose to be your most authentic self. Knowing and aligning with who you truly are. Grabbing a hold of your life and loving it unconditionally. We'll explore how others are living life without conditions. How they've turned their mess into their message. Their pain into their purpose. Their suffering into service. Our guests will be thought leaders, game changers, and divine nobodies. They will share their stories, insights, strategies, and successes. So you can create the life of spirit, service, and success. Welcome to an unconditional life.
Hello and welcome. It is an amazing morning. I'm glad you're here and joining me. I'm going to tell you that I'm officially going to fire the robotic voice of these videos. This is a low budget show, y'all. But I'm glad that you're here. And I'm extremely excited about today's show. I have an absolute brilliant mind and spirit that I have discovered with Ramneek Mathur, who is my guest today. And Ramneek and I met officially at an event that I hosted in Phoenix last year called Love Wave Live. And in getting to know each other, first of all, he handed me so nicely as a gift his book, The Logicrats, Logicrats, I should say. And I'm going to encourage you all to get a copy of his book. As I began to read his book, I got an insight to how his mind works. And I was intrigued the entire time. And so as we began to build a friendship and get to know each other and support each other in our work, I was like, wow, I now reach out to him for advice and or as a sounding board. And we really, really connected. But as I read his blogs and I also listen to his podcast, I'm like, this is a gentleman that the universe put in my path as a mirror of sorts, but also someone who really induces me to think, to reflect, and to question the things that I thought that I knew. And so these are the type of folks that I want to surround myself in my life. And Ramneek has been that for me. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. As a real estate broker, an investment advisor, a life strategist, and a published author, Ramneek is an entrepreneur at heart. There's no doubt about that. Now, with a unique and globally sourced blend of experience in entrepreneurship, investments, real estate, and personal development, he has resolved that, quote, to experience is to live, but to share the experience is to live well, end quote. And so he strives to live well. Ramneek's unique social and business acumen and his extensive travel log has afforded him a unique perspective of the modern condition. He is constantly craving anything remotely thought-provoking and truly feels good conversation coupled with a glass of wine and scotch. Okay, it is 8 a.m, so we'll have to do that another time, Ramneek, but he feels that it can be a considerable step towards human solidarity. And so today, I'm absolutely anticipating that we'll be talking about perspective, possibility thinking, and then also a possible run for president. We need to dig into that just a little bit, but it's my pleasure to introduce to all of you who are watching live and on our replay, Mr. Ramneek Mathur. So welcome.
How you doing? Hey, Joe.
So good to have you.
Man, I mean, I sound so much better when you talk about me. So let's just leave it there.
It's supposed to be that way. I feel the same. I've been invited on some podcasts, and I'm like, wow, I'm impressed with myself.
I know, right? Yeah, when someone else says it. So, well, it looks like you're already getting some people to say good morning and hi, Cindy. Hi, Gwen. Nice to meet you, kind of. So,
yeah,
awesome. I'm really excited to be here, Joe. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Yeah, so good to have you. And one of the things that we discovered as when I came to your office in Scottsdale, and you knew that we worked for the same company.
We did.
We
did our time.
Yeah, and like I remember when you were a district manager, and I'm like, wait a second. And I remember that you were in Scottsdale, but we never formally met.
Right.
It's a small world, and here we are today, right?
Here we are, full circle.
So, yeah. So in the introduction, there is something, and I told you this before, a life strategist, right? So talk a little bit about that role as a life strategist, or what you feel, your gifts, your talents, and you're a certified life coach, the approach and, to helping someone with their life strategy. Let's start there.
Yeah. I mean, my background, we work for the same company. So my background came from more of a financial perspective when it came to my work, my job, and everything else. But, I think you can attest to this just like I could, that once you start seeing the money side of things, people's finances and whatnot, you realize how everything affects everything in our lives. And it's not just, oh, this is my money and this is my politics and this is my personal life. Like everything affects everything. So over time, I started seeing that pattern over and over again. And I don't know, it's just the way of society that, we all suffer from imposter syndrome and am I good enough, or do I have the license to even do this, or anything like that. And over time, I felt like, you know what, I need to create the license that I'm looking for to be able to have these conversations with people and to help people in the way that I want. And the way that I want was not just one-sided. I didn't want to just help people when it came to the money side of things, because I felt like there were so many other aspects that affect the money side and vice versa that I wasn't able to have those conversations. And in doing that, I had to come up with like, what am I trying to do? How do I convey what I'm trying to do for people in a job title, in a sense, right? So then over huge, tremendous amount of permutations of different titles and words and thesaurus.com and everything else, I came down to these two words, life strategist, because as general as that sounds, the more you think about it, it's very specific, which is I want to help people in any way, shape, or form that I can based on my experiences. And obviously that comes with, that's a blanket statement, and I don't like to make blanket statements because I like to know what I'm talking about. So when I say like, I want to help you with your life vision and strategy, I make it it's my job to understand different aspects of how to get there. So the finance side of it, the personal development and mental mindset side of it, the relationship side of it, like all these different aspects of it. It's my work to do that. So, which also opened it up for my curiosity. It was like self-serving in a way, because now I was allowed to go to some seminar that a financial advisor wouldn't have normally gone to about mindset or this or that, because I'm a life strategist. I have to know these things. Let me get a new perspective on this so I can help my clients, so like it opened up a license for me to just continuously be curious. And I knew if I can stay curious, I'll always enjoy the work. And if I can't enjoy it, I know I'm not helping others. So I have to enjoy what I'm doing. So
that's beautiful. And, the idea of like a mission statement, or what is your mission in life, vision, etc. I mean, I think there's different perspectives. Like you mentioned, you don't like to necessarily make blanket statements, but there is some guiding force, right? And the more that you gain information and clarity, you meet people along the way, it gets clearer and clearer and clearer.
Right.
But I agree that it's a unique dynamic. So, real estate broker, investment advisor, and life strategist,
Right. Right. And I think life strategy, or life coaching and stuff, it came later in my career. I would say more in the last 3 years or so. I never really formally put myself out there that way. Even though, how many times do we end up playing a role that we don't say that we do, but we have been doing it the whole time? I always was a life coach in a sense to my clients and friends and family when it came to these things, because things come up, you don't talk about finances without talking about career choice. You don't talk about career choice without talking about what are you interested in life? What are your passions? Why are you doing what you're doing? Are you doing it because it's practical? Are you doing it because you don't feel like you can do something else? All these different nuances to what is life, you know. So like I think later I just took the initiative, or I took I developed enough courage to say, no, I'm also this, right? So and I think that kind of helped me, because until people see you in that context, or see that life strategist or life coach in your title, they don't think of you in that way. So they're not even going to think about the types of things they think they could share with you, you know? So,
Yeah, that's great. Now, which really leads me to the idea of an unconditional life, right? So when you
yeah.
hear that term or that idea of, what comes to mind for you? What would you say is a unconditional life?
You know, every time I see you come on and you talk about the unconditional life, like it's a very tough thing for me to embody. And I think that's by design, because I always see myself as something that I want to be able to change my mind all the time. Like if I see something new, I feel something new, I want to be able to change my mind. So that means I'm constantly growing or changing, maybe not even growing, just shifting my, you know, all the time in my life. So I feel like, to me, to live an unconditional life is to have lived every moment, and I've given to every moment what I thought was best at that moment. And in retrospect, I might be like, oh, I would have done that differently. But that's totally different than saying, with my vantage point at that moment, I I did what I felt like I wanted to do. And as
Yeah.
long as I can say that, I feel like I'm achieving, or you know, holding true to that unconditional life statement that you make, you know?
Yeah. I really, really, I'm just energized by that, your response, because I think there are some who feel like an unconditional life is a perfect life,
Right.
right? And what you just mentioned is the idea of like evolving, changing, making decisions and shifting,
Yeah.
all those things do align with the idea that it's uninhibited, it's unlimited, it's limitless, it's
Right.
wholehearted, it's complete. It's
Yeah.
not. And so, there are no conditions that I need to abide by to live this life, And I remember we had a conversation and I asked you about spirituality.
Yeah.
And if you recall that conversation, would you mind sharing what your response is to me? Because I was curious about your affinity towards spiritual things or this idea of spirituality.
Right.
And your response really shook me in a great way, So if you recall,
Yeah.
share that with me.
You know, I think I recall some of it. Like, my main response to people when it comes to spirituality, or at least my interpretation of spirituality, is, I take there's this axiom within the culture that I come from, which is predominantly Hinduism, and my family heritage is roots from India. So there's a saying that says, all rivers lead to the same ocean. And when I see religion and spirituality and all these different variations and permutations of it, that's what I kind of see, in the world, that, like, everyone starts somewhere, which is completely different than you, and then they're trying to get to somewhere else, which might be completely different than where you get to in life, and they're just trying to make their way. And that's kind of how I interpret spirituality, that, like, we're all trying to get to this kind of shared reality that may or may not be accurate. And in our journeys to do that, we start in different places. And to me, that's what spirituality is. And that's kind of how I interpret it. So it's not very combative. It's not very, I mean, that's a very flowery way of thinking about it, because in the real world, it's a messy place. But in essence, I feel like that's what people do, even in their heart, even with the, extremes on all sides. That's what I see, whether it's operating through fear or control or power, it all looks the same to me.
Right.
So so that's kind of my approach to it, and I think it served me well overall, because it kind of keeps me open to how other people interpret different things in their lives. So
Right. it's not linear, and it's not this one prescribed way
Right.
of being and doing. And I remember you saying spirituality is it is exactly that. It is the exploration. It is the journey that's a part of spirituality.
Yeah.
So, and I remember you sharing that analogy as well, or, from Hinduism around all rivers lead to the same ocean. Is that what it
Right.
was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, very cool. So, with everything that we are experiencing right now, what we see in the world, I recall when you questioned me at one point and said, is the world really changing? Or, or we hear it all the time. The world's changing.
yeah.
And I remember you kind of questioned that and said, is it really? Or are we
Yeah.
just waking up to what's
Right.
happening? So share more about that and what you mean
Yeah.
by
I mean, we live in a very interesting time. We can see so much more than even what our parents could see, and
that. Mhm.
even more than our grandparents could see. And if you go like 2, 3 generations back, we see so much more just by literally turning on our phone.
Mhm.
So I think I have this suspicion that yes, the world is changing, but we're also just seeing more and more quickly and more often. And I think that's 80% of the vision of what we're seeing. And then 20% of it is more like, okay, there's actual change going on top of that.
Right.
So like while people, just because you thought of something doesn't mean you learned something, right? So just because you saw something doesn't mean it just happened, right? So like so that's the way I kind of see a lot of these things. Like I feel like there's all these and sometimes and my clue, and it's funny, you go down the YouTube rabbit hole and everything else, which all this stuff is on our fingertips. But when I start looking and seeing old debates by different people like 60 years ago, 70 years ago, even political debates on our national stage that our grandparents were watching on TV if they had a TV, right?
Right.
People were brutal. Can I curse on this? I don't know. Like people were
Yeah, of course.
they were fucking brutal with each other, like, and that was on TV and no one had anything but TV, right? So everyone was watching this stuff, and which made me kind of feel like, man, it's always been this struggle. It's always been messy and aggressive and confrontational, and that's just how we've been. It's just now we're able to see it in 4K, So
Yeah, and with the social platforms that we have now, they are more vividly available.
right.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, when you said that, I started to think about many think, oh, this is all new, but not so much,
Yeah, yeah. And that's part of my own journey too, I guess, in a way. Like, I get frustrated too sometimes, and I can get frustrated with both sides of the coin. And when I start hearing and hearing a lot about like, oh, what people are finally realizing what's happening, and something new is happening and this and that. I just feel like there's a naivete in there that, like,
yeah,
listen, we've been around for a long time. People have been suffering is not a new thing, like, have a little humility and trying to understand what's happened in our past. And not everyone had a cell phone, even 20 years ago. Like people, how many countless lives have not had the opportunity to document their journeys?
right.
How do you know that we're just starting like this process? This process has been going on for a long time. There's so many stories that will never be told, and in that struggle. And I think we should have a little humility going into it and kind of honor that there's a lot that's been going on for a long time. And if you're tuning in now, that's great. Let's we can use your talents. Let's make something happen positively for everyone.
Definitely. Which leads me to, I wanted to share an excerpt from one of your blogs, and I'm going to pull up an image here that serves as a great backdrop. And so for those of you who are watching, you'll see a globe here that, and it's upside down. And that actually is the name of the blog. So as that is playing, allow me to read and listen closely. So this is written by Ramneek. And he said, "Sometimes I wonder what the world would be like if we did two things differently. If in the face of adversity, against the tugging with all our lizard brain, we looked around for someone less fortunate than ourselves and helped them. And if in the face of success and prosperity, we helped ourselves. Often in the darkness of uncertainty, in the midst of unyielding difficulty, we seek to grasp anything that will numb the pain and suffering, anything that will relinquish the now. Often on the platforms of our prosperity, if we are fortunate to remember, we may extend a calculated helping hand. But I wonder what would happen if we helped when we needed the help. Maybe we would discover that reaching out to help was the strength we were looking for. Maybe we would discover that celebrating in our good fortune, we would become strength others were hoping for. I wonder what the world would be like upside down. Perhaps for once, we would be right side up." So and one of the things that I'm really drawn to is the use of, when you display the paradox with, some thoughts, and it always just, my brain goes into this, whoa, and the idea of upside down, maybe that is right side up. So speak a little bit about what prompted that,
Yeah,
and,
that's a deep one. That one I wrote very quickly, but it was kind of in the wake of everything we're kind of experiencing right now. With the COVID-19 thing, the tragedy around George Floyd and the videos circulating there, and his story, seeing that was disappointing in so many different ways. But then he's not the only one that experiences these things, which is even more tragic if you even have the mental capacity to feel through that, right? And so I just started, I think one thing in society that we are either losing or maybe we never really had is playing with different ideas gracefully. And that's kind of what I was trying to do there in that piece. I know, at least from my experience, that there's certain things we do when we see success or experience success. And I kind of wanted to think through and imagine what would it be like if we did things the opposite. So like what I was talking about in that piece was, say Joe, like we won the lottery and we won $100 million, right? Then all of a sudden, we might start thinking about like, all right, well, how much can I help others now? People I don't know, right? And that's what I meant by the calculated hand. Like once we have stuff in our hands, then we're like, okay, now let me give away 20% to things I don't understand or know.
Right.
And then when we don't have things, we're seeking help, right? Or maybe if we have the courage to, we're trying to seek for help. So I was like, well, what if we did things? What if we thought of it differently? Like, what if when we are helpless, we just tunnel vision and try to help people around us? And what if when we have stuff, when we actually make it, we help ourselves? Because to me, when I help myself, I end up helping people I love.
Yeah.
Because, justify it as an ego thing or this or that, but you help yourself. So like, what if success, when you experience success, we help people around us? And what if when we don't have success, we help strangers instead of the opposite, right? We try to seek to help strangers when we have a lot.
Right.
So I was just like, well, what if we flip that around? Maybe what would happen then? So
yeah. That's awesome. And as you have pinpointed the essence of that message, thank you for giving even more meat to it. I started in my mind, I started to think about the people that I've come across in my life. And whoa, they embody that, man. It's like I think there are a couple people right now who are watching who are saying, "Oh, that's me," you know.
Yeah.
And I just revel in the people who are down in the dumps and but they still show up to serve others.
Right.
You know, so that whole paradox around the world's upside down, maybe it's right. I mean, once again, there's just so much to even continue to explore in that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's when you talked about calculated, giving, it's
Right.
just that gives us beautiful permission to really walk back our own belief systems, our own ways of thinking, our own curiosity, or about how we make decisions. I mean, many of the folks who are watching, really understand the idea of the subconscious and how that drives, our daily lives. And 90 to 95% of the decisions we make, we really don't make,
Right. Right.
And until we enter into that idea of consciousness, right, and really starting to get curious, do we begin to unpack all those things, and now that becomes our subconscious. So when you pose, when you write, that's what that really does, like, move me in that way. And so
I mean, that means the world to me, Joe, because, like, I mean, to me, like, writing has always been my, I don't want to say my comfort zone, but where I enjoy being. In the day of social media and everything else, I've had to, like, train myself to speak better on the fly and try to show up more visually and stuff like that. But writing has always been my what I enjoy the most when it comes to expressing different ideas and thoughts. So that means the world to me when you say that, because that's what I enjoy doing. And like we were talking about off camera, like, just hearing someone say, "Wow, you know what? I enjoyed that." Like, that sparks that's all I need to keep going. I just, it doesn't need to be more than that. That someone read my stuff and got something out of it. That's the holy grail for what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, it sparks a lot of, I mean, it really, once again, moves me to this point of reflection. Your ability to tell stories, like, and I want you to talk a little bit about Logicrats and the essence of the book.
Yeah.
And, because that's what really hooked me in the very beginning. So let's go there. Let's talk a little bit about your book.
Yeah. I felt like I had to write something and be done with it and get it out there so I could work on the next thing. And, like, when you keep thinking about the same thoughts over and over, I think there is actually power in writing something down. And because I feel like it gets it out of your mind. So you just stop thinking about the same thing over and over. And I was like, okay, let me do that with a lot of ideas that I've been thinking about for years, and when I look back on my writing pads, like, I could see, tidbits of that book for years. And that was my sign. I'm like, let me just get this all out in the best way possible so I can work on the next thing, because I felt like I was getting stagnant in my thoughts.
Yeah.
So the book was kind of self-serving in that sense for me. It was more of a creative outlet for me to kind of get things out. But then the concept of Logicrats came about because things have just gotten, or it seems like things have been getting so much more political lately. And when I started writing this book, it's hard for me to actually confess this, but I started writing the concept for this book back in, like, 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't publish it until 17. And a lot of friends and family will be rolling their eyes right now because all of them were always saying, like, just get it out. What are you doing? Get it out. So it was Logicrats was a word or a coined phrase from several conversations I've had with friends and family on an identity that I created to put out there as this is my political identity, because I was just kind of fed up with the way the political conversations were going around me, and then just everything I was seeing online. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to invent my own, because I'm tired of the buckets and the categories that people try to put me in. So I'll create my own category. And I feel like if I can create this category, I suspect there's others that wish this was a category. So that's kind of what it was. And Logicrats isn't necessarily a political book. When you read it, I hope people don't feel like it's a political book at all. I hardly talk about it at all. I have a disclaimer in the beginning saying that people can take this politically, but I don't talk about politics at all in this book.
Yeah.
And the concept was, I was very much focused on, while a lot of these political organizations, the left, the right, the libertarian, the green, whatever party you're affiliated with, at some point or another, I see them dictating what you should be thinking. Like, if you're a Democrat, you should be thinking this. If you're a Republican, you should be thinking this, right? So I was like, all right, I'm going to create an identity that focuses on how you think. If you're a Logicrat, you think this, like this.
Yeah.
That means that you might have different conclusions, but the thought process behind those conclusions should be consistent. So I was very much focused on how we think, not what we think, when I was creating this kind of almost like a mindset, Logicrats as a mindset. So, and that's what I tried to kind of lay out there, like how here's a consistent way of thinking. And if you do this, then we're going to have much better conversations when we disagree.
Yeah.
You know, so
I had to write that down. How you think versus what you think.
Yeah.
And I think for those who are parents, I think for me, at least, that's my role, is to help to have my daughters, right, help them with how they think versus what they think. I think that's
like the essence of parenthood, right? Like, we have to get our children to be okay without us. And how are they going to be okay without us? They have to be able to do things on their own. And how do they do that on their own? They have to have a consistent way of finding how to be okay in life.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. What kept you from 2012 to 2017 from writing the book? What are one or two?
Like I was writing all the time, but it was just perfectionism, I think, in a way.
Yeah.
It was, honestly, the actual book is probably 50% of what I've written for that book, and I took out a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I stripped it down. I'm like, is this necessary? No, it's not. And I just stripped it down because I wanted it to be just a consistent foundation. And a lot of times when we're creating a foundation, we end up decorating more than we need to, and I just had to, it just took a lot for me to be like, is this necessary? Nope. And just get out something that is.
Yeah, it was very concise.
Yeah. To me, it was something I'm like, whatever I put out there, I want to be 99% sure no one can pick it apart before I do it.
Wow.
And if they can, then that's my growth, right? Yeah. And I didn't want to put my own ideas in there because my own ideas contrived from this foundation, but I'm not talking about my ideas. And I always had to take myself out of the book, right? I'm like, no, this is just my idea. This isn't consistent with the foundation. Like, let it go. So it was almost like an ego kind of a exercise.
Yeah, that's powerful. So for those of you who are watching and you have the book right here, right? Like, either continue to write or move towards that decision. Is like, I'm putting this out there in the world, right?
Put it out there.
There's a lot of people that I know who have that in them, and they're also very gifted in writing or expressing, or get a ghostwriter, but you have something to say.
And just write it, right? You got to write it the first time so you can pick it apart the second time. Like, it's not going to come out perfect right away.
Right.
And you just got to get it out there so you can let it sit. And it's a process. And and a lot of times people feel like, oh, I've got a book to write, and it's in their heart, it's in their mind, right? But when you actually put it down, it's like 3 pages and you're done. And it's like, well, you need more than that, right? So it's a you'll realize what you're missing when you put it down on paper, because then you can see it, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah, awesome. Well, you were talking about politics, and you, my friend, made a decision, or at least are exploring it, right? The idea of running for president.
yeah, I
And
guess I put it out there. So it's
you
in
did put it out there,
it's in
and
the
I was like,
Facebooks.
heck yeah! I was like, I'm Team Ramneek, and
That's awesome.
so I wanted to explore that, and this is cool because I'm gonna, of course, save this broadcast. So when 4 years down the line, or who knows, 8 years down the line, I can say, yeah, I was one of the first ones to.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah.
So chat about that.
I am a political person, but I'm not like in your face about it. Like I think about issues, social, and when I say political, it's like social issues, cultural issues, economic issues. We're all political. It's just how we express it is kind of different. So, this last couple of months, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put it out there. One day I'm going to be president. I wanted to put that out there so then I can start writing in the tone of voice. And this is a completely different project, like side hobby project, whatever you want to call it, than just my actual work, where I can put together thoughts in the context of, this is where I see society. This is where I feel like we could go. And, these are the challenges that I see and how I interpret it. So I'm trying to put the logicrat type ideals like to the test, in terms of, I'm going to do my best to use this foundation and show up in that way. And to do that, I just had to kind of announce that, because then, there's a practicality to it too. A lot of people follow my work online because of the entrepreneurship side of it, the life coaching side of it, and all that stuff. And politics can become its own thing. And people, when they enroll to follow me and like my page and follow my content, they enroll to, and they have an expectation of certain things that they might see on my feed. And that doesn't give me the right to start this whole political venture into that same feed. So, on occasion I'll share it into my main feed, but if you're politically inclined, or if you're politically interested in what I have to say, then I wanted to create a separate channel that you can go to, where you can kind of see my thoughts around that, because I didn't feel like it was appropriate for me to just assume everyone would enroll in this aspect of my, projects and work. So,
well, I appreciate that mindfulness.
Yeah,
I start thinking about my own, and it's like everything is in there.
Yeah.
You're gonna get me eating at a restaurant, and then I'll talk about love, and I'll talk about anti-racism.
Yeah.
It's all in there. So that's very mindful of you, and it's cool. I really appreciate it. So today, let's just say you were running. What thoughts come to mind in terms of what platform you would be running, on, or one or two things that you think right now and today, what we're experiencing, would you want to bring forth?
Well, I think in my head, I'm thinking of, I feel like our country needs a new deal. We need a new set of ideas. We need to bring a lot of things that we have in our systems into light, and we need to reimagine them, because they just don't serve us anymore. And so, if you've read some of my stuff, then you'll realize that, like, it doesn't matter what side I started on. I could argue a more Republican side. I could argue a more Democratic side. When you realize that politics is more of a wheel, not a spectrum, then you're able to reframe arguments, and you're able to reframe topics for discussion based on whatever values someone is showcasing. So like that form of debate and that form of understanding social issues, economic issues, where you can you can make numbers show anything.
Sure.
Like, it's just, so like, what is your goal? What is the merit of your argument? That's the essence of what I want to get into. So, I have Republican minded friends that really gravitate towards my ideas, and Democratic too. And I also annoy both sides because, if I had to play their game and be on their spectrum, I call myself a raging centrist. So like I'm very much in the middle in that sense, but that doesn't mean I don't have a stance. I just have a third door that I usually go through because nothing is black and white. There's never either or. Usually there's always different options available to you.
Yeah. That's really, really powerful.
So yeah, we know the challenges we're all facing, there's cultural challenges, social challenges, and then the economics of it all. It's all one big mess, Joe. Just one big mess.
Well, and that's why I, named our show today, Can't We All Just Get Along? Right.
Right.
And, after I'd done the graphic for it, I'm like, oh, wait a second. That's something that Rodney King said. I think that's what he said. Can we all just get along?
Yeah.
And that idea. And so I wanted to throw that out to you. There's so much division, and it's palpable. You could feel it. And it's so heavy, and in a world where there's chaos, is harmony attainable? Is this idea of solidarity attainable? And what are your thoughts in terms of approaching this idea of unity? Is that possible?
I think it is, but I think the conversations we're having are speaking past that. We're talking past each other. And that's one of the core frustrations that I have, is that we don't even agree on the fundamentals of how we think the world should be, and then we're arguing on top of that. So it's like, so like first we have to figure out, do we agree on the end goal? And if we do, then we could probably have a productive conversation on how to get there. But sometimes I see people arguing with each other about solutions, but I'm like, dude, you guys don't even believe. One person believes the underlying, premise. The other one doesn't even believe it. Like, for example, like healthcare, some people think it's a right. Some people don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's have that conversation first. What are we talking about? How to fix it? What are we trying to fix? Like, you don't even believe we should have it for everyone. And some people believe that, okay, well, you should have access, but it shouldn't be free. And then some people are like, no, it should be totally free. And then all these people are coming together to try to find solutions. Like, how are you going to find a solution? You guys don't agree with healthcare.
Right.
Like, let's figure that out first. Right. So,
yeah.
And then you put social media on top of that, and then here you are, so.
Absolutely. No, it's a great point. I mean, let's get to the core root of what we're discussing. Yeah. Agree on this is what the outcome is, what we want, and then begin to layer on different perspectives.
Exactly.
To debate, to seek to understand, find that middle ground per se. Yeah. Right? So yeah, that's.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah. It's tough work, but like one thing I said in the book is that I'm tired of the middle ground, and I'm obliging everyone to reach for higher ground from now on. And that's just my stance. Like if you can't reach for higher ground with me, then find another table. So.
Hello. Okay, so I'm taking notes. Thank you. Yeah, that is a new graphic right there. Definitely higher ground. That is awesome. What other, once again, in terms of this idea of can we all get along and polarity of what we are experiencing, I'm noticing it for myself. There's been more heightened awareness around conspiracy theories, and we're being controlled and all those types of things. And I see a lot of evidence in that case. What I'm also experiencing is that in the midst of people, in their own words, like waking up to what's really, really happening, I think there's an unintended consequence of, it's like us that we know this stuff to the sheep over there who are following everybody. So there's this unintended division already. Here's what we know, and we're woke to it. And, you know, ha, 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 you're wearing masks and you're just being led. And in that, there's just even more of this gap between, wait a second here, you know, it's like, now that you know all this, right? And you have this wisdom and this understanding, and you're woke into the fact that what we see isn't necessarily what it is, right? So there's something beneath what we see on the surface. I can appreciate that,
right?
But when it induces even more this us versus them, and this idea around the deep state and it just seems to perpetuate the division even more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does. Yeah. And you know, I always joke, like, I don't trust anyone that doesn't have at least a little conspiracy theory in them. You know, like like there's an element of truth to conspiracy theories, you know, but
Absolutely.
Obviously they go off the rails completely. You know, like there might be a certain fundamental concern there of some sort. But then we have to have a meeting of the minds, like, okay, well, how do we prove or disprove this, and how do we move forward, and all these different things. And you know, I think some people need, and in that sense, I feel like this is where, like, more on the left side of things, this is how we lose a lot of people in this manner, because we end up picking fights that no one's even wanting to pick, and then we lose them. You know, like, it's just, you know, it's just, we start arguing about things that just don't make sense or aren't even relevant. And some people need to get their feelings hurt, you know, like if you really feel a certain way, then all right, you know, put your boots on, get on a debate, get on a panel and talk about it, you know, like talk with another person that has the background to counter that, you know, and see, let's get to some kind of truth here. You know, like if you don't feel like masks work or if this or that, all right, well, let's get a couple of epidemiologists on the panel and let's, you know, why don't you publish your paper and they'll publish theirs and let's put it out there. You know, it's when you do it on social media, there's so much misinformation. There's so much you can't verify, and people don't know what to verify and where. You know, it's just, you know, science is science, and science is an ever-changing foundation. And people feel like, oh, since the science changed, that's a gotcha. You know, like there's something there. It's like people don't understand that conceptually, science is just our best way of understanding something.
Right.
If we understand something better, the science will change.
Right.
So if there is something fundamentally different or incorrect, then present it and then move forward. You know, there's no conspiracy. That's just how science works. So like, if you found a better way to do something, share it. And if it does actually work, it'll stick.
Yeah.
You know, so. Yeah.
And I would say that there are people who have an affinity to move into those conversations or explore, get curious. And then those who don't, they trust certain, you know, avenues of information blindly.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that if that works for them.
Yeah.
For me, it's been this kind of in the middle ground of, not higher ground, but in this space where there's people who I hold in high esteem who have differing views.
Right.
So I look at myself and say, wow, I don't want to engage in the cancel culture.
Yeah.
If you don't believe like me, unfollow, leave, goodbye. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I'm perpetuating what I'm wanting to create. So I have purposely went on actually pages and lives where fundamentally there are some things I don't agree with. Yeah. And what's happened in 2020 has brought out from the surface these beliefs and ideals and ideologies and paradigm shifts that have frankly surprised me.
Yeah.
And as it inside of me, I now see through another lens of like, ooh, I don't like what they're saying. And then it then like switches my opinion of somebody I think that's okay. But at the same time, it's like, wait a second, I want to foster this idea of full acceptance, not
Yeah.
necessarily of the ideals, but of the
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
And so that just happened yesterday, and I got on, and I was not agreeing with some of the things that were being shared, and I just typed in disagreed, but I love you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really how I felt. It's like, but I wanted to get super curious about it. I said, can I still have a relationship with someone who I fundamentally don't necessarily agree with some of the things that are coming out? And I'm still exploring that,
Yeah.
because I think
that's a great thing to do, and one thing I talk about is we are not our ideas,
yes,
and people think that whatever they hold to be true is an extension of themselves, like physically, and that's how we kind of treat each other. Like, if you
right,
attack my idea, you're attacking me, so therefore, like, I'm going to attack back, right?
yeah,
and and the moment we are able to disassociate ourselves from everything we think is going to be a huge day in our history where we're going to step forward, because we are not what we think ever.
yeah,
We aren't. Like, we hold ideas to be true because it's the best understanding we have. Ideas are tools. When a better idea comes along, we use that, right? So
yeah.
as soon as you have that mental unlock, you can't be offended when someone contradicts what you think.
Yeah, that's good.
Like, it has nothing to do with me. Like, you can say, I disagree with you. It's like, great.
Yeah,
Like, like, okay, like it did. And people get so fight or flight when they're contradicted, right? Because they're perceiving that contradiction as an attack on themselves.
Yeah,
And,
phenomenal reminder. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and you doing that, going into places where you don't agree, that's fantastic. Like, it's like you're fine, right?
Yeah, I'm intentionally putting myself in uncomfortable positions and leaning into it to discover, to really observe what is happening inside of me and how that might be expressed, etc. Not to be perfect, but the idea of what would it mean for me to live this life without condition?
Yeah.
Right. And it comes in this form, and that's how it's showing up. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you for that. All right, so we're coming towards. Oh my gosh, time has just flown.
I know.
Ramneek.
I know.
So I'm going to ask you one last question here that was asked of me on a show that I was invited on. You might. This might sound familiar. And what was posed to me, now once again pose it to you, is if people were to remember you for only your words, what words would those be?
Oh man. You can't do that to me, Joe. You can't do that to me. You can't do that to me. That's a good question. People were to remember me by my words. Honestly, at this moment in my life, I would say keep going. And I think that would be my parting wisdom to people, because I feel like there's so much that I'll never see in my life, and there's so much that you will never see in your life, and that's if you keep going. And I think the hardest, I think where we lose our spirit is when we give up on seeing what else we can do, seeing what else there is out there. And for anyone who, and I see the pain out there, especially nowadays with everything going on, and a lot of people find themselves in a dark place, and they find themselves in a hopeless place. And what I try to, my best message to them would be to keep going, because if you find yourself, like, I think Winston Churchill said this in a cunning way. Like, he said, if you find yourself in hell, keep going, because it can only get better, right? Like, if you find yourself in a hard place, just keep going, because it can, like, there's a risk it could get better.
Absolutely.
Like,
absolutely.
And take the risk, And,
this is beautiful. I'm having a moment here because, before you came on in the studio, I sat here and I always do just to be still a little bit. And I just, told my source, I said, okay, I just want to be a vessel today. I said, I always look for the thumbprint and everything, the touch that I'm on the right path. And so you've been my third guest, and I've asked the question in different ways. And my first guest, the response was be authentic. My second guest was show up. And you have now said, keep going.
Wow.
And so now I see that these little gems are, oof.
And for the record, I see your videos, and I haven't had a chance to see your last episode, so I had no idea that those were the messages that you received before. Like,
yeah.
So.
And so what I wanted to create was this idea of unity through diversity. And my three guests, I purpose to come from different walks of life and what they're experiencing to show the commonality through it all and what is sown, what is sewn together and so knitted. So for those of you who are watching, be authentic, show up, keep going. So Ramneek, thank you for your wisdom. Your
thank insight, you, Joe.
Yeah, for prompting us to continue to really be curious about, the way that we look at life and the way we look at things, and to live an unconditional life allows you to make those shifts and those changes at what serves you in your own path in life. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. Thank you all for listening. Share this video. Follow as I continue to build a community that is committed to fostering and living an unconditional life. You can find me on Facebook and then on Instagram under that moniker of An Unconditional Life. Follow Ramneek at ramneekmathur.com. He's also on social media under that same name. So we'd love for you guys to support what we're doing to really bring our own essence into the world, because at the end of the day, love, it is the answer.
It is.
Thank you all for watching.
Joe.
Take care. Thanks, Ramneek. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, and there it is.